If you've ever written into the newsletter to ask a question, you'll find that I respond clearly and accurately whenever possible. But I do something that is very much not welcome, yet helps you achieve greater success. And you can do this same thing with your clients to get better results for them and yourself. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. If you're a marketer, a consultant, a copywriter, and you want better, higher quality clients, you can't get all excited and pee your pants every time somebody calls in on the phone. You can't jump on every opportunity that comes, offer discounts, and beg for clients to come to you. That is not the positioning of a quality services provider. And so there's this thing that I do when people write in and they ask questions, and I'm going to share it with you here today. Now, there are two parts to this, and when you do this particular thing, when people ask you questions, they'll be more engaged, they'll be more likely to take action with your response, you'll learn more about their needs and desires, and you'll be able to help them. It's something a doctor does. It's something a high-paid lawyer does. It's something that positions you as the expert in the room and the right person to ask questions of. Actually, somebody who can deliver an answer that's worth using, that's worth understanding, that's worth benefiting from. If you don't use this particular two-step technique, what will happen is that you'll be bombarded with low-value people who really don't think much about the question. And so, will they think much about the answer? People who are simply asking you rather than asking a search engine because they have no intention of using the information you provide. Very often you'll get questions from people who have no money to spend, no sense among themselves, both financial sense and common sense, to actually do anything with what you share. And this is often something that we do when we write content or that we broadcast our latest tips and tricks, or that when we're out begging on the internet. Now, I have a specific plan for doing these podcasts and how I develop these podcasts. They're all part of larger programs, reports, deliverables for clients. I'm essentially doing a podcast in draft. I'm practicing my speaking skills. I'm trying to learn different dramatic methods and pauses, and you'll see that in the different texture and styles of my podcasts over the years. But there are two things that I do every time I get a question from a subscriber, and why I always liberally offer you to be able to ask your questions. Now, very often I get questions that I've answered before, and this technique supports those questions. And I'm going to share the two methods here, and then I'll share with you practical implementation and the psychology behind why these methods work. The first thing that I do is I am open to your questions. Ask me anything. You'll very often find that my response is far beyond what was even necessary to answer your question. I'll give you depth, context, detail. I'll ask you questions to learn more about your situation so that the answer I provide is a valid answer, something that when you look at it, you're like, holy smokes, it's like a paid consultation in an email. Now, if I'm going to have a conversation with you, I'll ask you to make a list of questions, provide the list of questions in advance, and then when we have our conversation, we're going to do it interview style. And I do that for a very particular reason because, number one, I want to make sure you think through the questions first. Okay, because I don't want to have a 20-minute conversation with you. That's why when you email in a question, you get a written response, and I'll write it when I have the time to write it, which is usually in between client meetings or billable work. But ultimately, I'm not wasting time answering the questions to the best of my ability, but I'm not sitting down and spending 2 hours in a response. I might spend 2 hours with a response, but I'm not sitting down for 2 hours with a response. Now, there are times I've been asked the same question over and over again, so I'll give you the response I gave the previous person, but maybe revised specifically for your situation, depending on how much context you give in the question. So number one, I'm always available for questions. Now, if you met me in the hallway at a conference or we were at an event together, I'm going to answer the questions briefly using a method, which is the number 2 here, a method that requires a lot of burden on your part. And I'll tell you why we do that later. Now, I'll still answer the question, but again, if I'm at an event, we can't spend 30 minutes in the hallway, and there is no record of our conversation. There's no value that I've given you that you can come back to because we just offhand talked in the hallway. Second, I'm not prepared to answer your question because I don't know who you are or what you've done. At least when you send an email to me or you comment on a message board, I can look at your past quotes or your interests, and I can run you through a database or something and figure out who you are, what you do, what your social media looks like, what company you're working for, what challenges that your industry faces, and I can answer your question in that context. But I always require you to write down a question. So number 2, I require some effort on the part of the person asking the question. Now, if they ask me a question that doesn't have enough context to answer, I'll usually point them in the right direction with a brief outline, maybe 12 things to do to address that. I might send you a copy of a small special report or a PDF file of something in the membership site that's going to address your specific issue, even if it is just how to ask better questions. Now, I'm not going to discourage you by saying, your question was horrible and I can't answer it in the context it was. Very often you find that out after you hit send because the response I give you isn't as complete as you desire. So I understand that in your mind you can have a certain question, but when it goes on the paper, it doesn't come out the way you want it to. And that's okay. I understand that. That's why I don't mind going back and forth a little bit to get clarification to make sure I can get your answer. But again, we're doing this in a recordable medium. So on the telephone, we're recording the call. We're doing this in not real time. I'm preparing the emails as I go and getting them over to you, and you're replying back when you have a chance. Now, of course, you can accelerate all this by doing a paid consultation, but that's not the purpose of this call. The purpose of this call is to teach you a 2-step method that helps you get better clients. So step number 2 is some kind of action the other person takes. So I'll give you an example. I was on LinkedIn, and someone came to me and said, "Hey, how did you become a freelance writer?" Now, when they say freelance writer, do they mean freelance copywriter? Do they think I write fiction? What is the deal? So I asked them a question back. Is why you're asking? What would you like to achieve? Are you interested in becoming a freelance copywriter or marketer? And they said, yes, I'm interested in copywriting, and I want to know how you got started. So I gave them a response. There was a few sentences. They talked about how I was in business. I found copy was a great way to syndicate and reach a larger audience. And so I used copywriting to sell my own services. But later, I discovered that many people have challenges with communications, and I could write copy for them to help them be more clear and concise. And so I was solving a problem in the marketplace. So this is useful information to them. But what they were really asking is, how did you get paid for writing? Now, I know that, but they don't have context about why I get paid for writing. See, you can get paid for writing by going on one of these freelance message boards or Fiverr, or just sending spam to people until somebody hires you for something. But you don't get clients if that's all you do. Clients have problems that you can solve. Very often we solve these problems with the written word. We use headlines, opening sentences, opening paragraphs, subheads, fascination bullet points that are actually headlines that telegraph benefits. We use call to action. We use the structure of the letter to take an individual from where they are in their life experience to where they want to be through a gateway, which is the offer that we have. But I can't give them all that and after a brief little question. I need to know more about the other person. I need to know, what are they doing now? Because it's different for somebody who's not already doing some freelance work if they want to get started in freelance copywriting. Now, maybe they're already a freelance copywriter and they're not making the money they need to make, and they want to get started making money as a freelance copywriter. Maybe they have marketing skills and they've been in a brand agency, and they've been wondering what this direct response thing is, this accountable marketing. They have to be comfortable with being measured and being accountable for the marketing that they're doing. Because again, I'm a direct response copywriter. Now, again, I'm not even very good at being a direct response copywriter. I can write lead generation pieces and sales letters and other things like that, but I'm not the best. So they may be saying, at your level, how did you get into freelance copywriting? How did you get into freelance writing? So after I got a little more context for them, I started sharing with them that first I found people who wanted to pay for copy. See, it isn't about learning the next latest gimmick or thing. If you already have some skills in persuasive communications, if you already have some skills in copywriting, if you've got a book on copywriting that you've read a few times, if you've seen the Gary Halbert letter, if you've read Dan Kennedy's books, if you've read Ted Nicholas's newsletter, and you put that into action to promote yourself, and now you have somebody sitting in front of you who wants to hire someone to help them communicate better, then suddenly you're in the business of a freelance copywriter. Now, that's a blessing and a curse because it means you can get started with what you've got, but ultimately anybody can get started with what they've got, and so you got a lot of competition in the marketplace. So now you need some unique value that you deliver to that potential client. So I explain this in a few words. I'm sure it's in my content vault somewhere. I could dig it up if I wanted to, but here's the big point. Number one, I'm open to the questions. It gives me an idea of what the audience is interested in. Number two, I ask them to take a little action on their part. Initially, that action is to tell me more about who they are, what they do, so I can even qualify them as a prospect. But finally, I said to this person, would you like your first copywriting assignment? Okay, because that's the big thing these days. Everybody's afraid of their first assignment. How do I get my first assignment? How do I get my first? The first assignment is very easy. And you're going to be your own client for the first assignment. It's the second, third, fourth, and more assignments every day, every week, every month that's really the hard part. So I said to her, would you like your first assignment? And I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll share that first assignment with you, and you can use this assignment to build your portfolio, and you can use this assignment to start promoting yourself. So number one is you're open to questions. Number two, you ask the client to do something. Now, in this case of this first assignment, I know it's a little tricky, though, because it's the same thing I do to help clients get started. But you are open to questions, but the prospect doesn't know that they can ask you to write copy for them, or even why they should ask you to write copy for them, until you first reached out to the individual. So the assignment I gave her was to find a charity of her choice, go to their website, read about this charity, and then write 3 articles that should be on this website. Go do the keyword research, go write 3 articles. What do you think, from your perspective as an outsider of the organization, that this organization needs to share in order to continuate their message? Write 3 articles. I told her right up front, 1 article is going to be garbage, 1 article is going to be okay, and 1 article is going to be good. You're not going to know which one until you've reviewed them. So you write them, review them against what you know from the website. While you're doing that, find the decision makers at the company. And then after you've revised the articles, and don't need a bunch of revisions, after you revise the articles, you're going to make a contact and you're going to share with them why you wrote the 3 articles. Now, you didn't write the 3 articles because I told you to. You have to find something in the message or in the mission about why you wrote them, and you will offer them for free in exchange for permission to use those articles in your portfolio, and a request that they share the results of the articles. When they look at the articles, you're not asking them to critique the articles. You'd like them to test the articles. To give you some feedback, you'll write the article exactly the way they need it, and to give some feedback on how the articles work. Now, the other person wants something, so these articles have to help them get what they want. Most nonprofits want fundraising, so you're going to have a call to action at the bottom about fundraising, and that is the measure of value that you're going to use. You're going to ask them to code the fundraising letter, and just let you know in a couple weeks if it was useful and valuable to their organization. And if they want to give you a testimonial, that's fine, but you're just looking for their permission to use these articles in your portfolio. And you'll clearly state that they were provided pro bono. So they weren't provided for free. So you see what we did here. We let the prospective client, or the nonprofit in this case, know that you're open to questions and that you've done a little bit of homework in advance and you've offered something of value, and all you're asking is for their feedback. Once they give you the feedback, you ask them to do something, which is to give you a testimonial to let you know how much fundraising was, how valuable it was in their fundraising. You can do this, by the way, with an article, with an email newsletter, with a lead generation page. You can write whatever you think that site needs, but you tell them why you think it needs it. And then ultimately, you've now added pieces to your portfolio. Now, what if they say no? Well, no is a good response. It's better than not knowing anything. And so if you get them on the phone and they say, no, I'm really not interested, we don't hire copywriters, that's okay. This is pro bono work. I just love your organization. I love your mission, and I wanted to do these things for you because I'm not really in a position to donate. This type of copywriting would cost $2,000 or $3,000, and I'm not in a position to donate $2,000 or $3,000. So I wrote these up for you in exchange. Just simply let me know how it works out. And what you've done there is the same thing that I'm doing with the questions, except you've used it to build your portfolio, and now you as a copywriter. You're now a copywriter. You're now a freelance copywriter, basically. So quickly, before I don't want this program to go on too long, let me talk about the psychological elements that we have here. Number one, the chain of communication. Somebody asks me a question. I reply to the question. It gives them something of value, but it asks for action again, which has them come back to me, and we start building a chain of communications, this loop that builds stronger bonds between them and me as a provider. Number two, psychologically, they have to do something, otherwise they will not use your answers. I am well aware that of the hundreds of questions I've answered over the years, the other people don't do anything with it in the majority of the cases. Now, I use their question to write a draft, so I haven't lost anything. And now I have a draft article that ends up on the website, it ends up in a podcast, it ends up doing something. But again, if the other person isn't asked to do something, so for example, I'll provide 2 or 3 podcasts, and before that person can be a client, they have to have listened to 2 or 3 of the podcasts, summarize what they learned, or write in any questions, and submit that to me in the context of their need before I will consider them for a paid consultation. Now, I don't need a lot of paid consultations to hit my numbers. I don't need a lot of clients to hit my numbers because I've already got clients in a pipeline. And these individuals are really in the top of the pipeline, and they haven't demonstrated to me that they even have a problem that's worth investing in to do a little bit of, to get a solution. And so if they won't invest in the problem by listening to a few of my programs, then they're not going to invest in hiring me to help them solve that problem. Do you see where I'm coming from there? So I'm setting them up psychologically for success because they haven't met me at the bottom of the mountain. I didn't take the bus to their office. I'm not sitting in their place. I'm at the top of the mountain where I should be with all the gods standing around doing what we do, which is serving clients. So I'm not taking time away from serving clients to answer somebody's question if it goes beyond what I can provide them initially. But again, in what I provide them, I ask them to take specific action, and that is a compliance exercise to make sure they can follow instructions. And then I might ask them to do something even deeper, which helps them further solve their problem, discover their challenge, or ultimately know where to go. And if they are not willing to do that, then they will not implement what they pay for me to do for them. So that's, again, why we always start with a paid consultation. We don't jump into projects until we've had the paid consultation, and then very often the folks that become my clients have known me for years. So this has been about 2 key things you can do to get better clients, and primarily it's conditioning the client, sifting and sorting and filtering out the clients rather than jumping on any warm breath, and actually getting clients that are willing to do the work. Because those 3 letters that this young woman will send to her favorite nonprofit, they could just throw it in the trash and do nothing with it. They could just say, oh, yeah, thanks. We get a lot of these solicitations all the time. We're not going to do anything with it. Do you see what I'm saying here? That's to be understood. She gained a practical implementation of the advice that I gave her about getting new clients which is not to go do free work for people. It's basically build a portfolio while you're doing work for yourself to generate leads and make sales. But ultimately, she gets this in a practical way, doing something she enjoys, an area of passion, and ultimately gets some kind of experience to build up to where she wants to be. So folks, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. I hope this has been valuable to you. Of course, I know it's been valuable to you because I built it off of what other people have found valuable. But anyway, this has been the two things that you do to get extremely valuable clients. And some clients are going to laugh. They're going to say, I'm not going and doing all the work. I'm asking you to do the work. And now you discovered their true objective, which was to get free work from you by picking your brain rather than becoming a client or hiring a professional like yourself. If you have any questions about this or any other programs that I cover, you'll find more details, more insights, more tools when you visit www.adbriefings.co.uk. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. And if you're new to this podcast, then join our newsletter so you can find out where I hit all these podcasts all over the internet. And if you have a specific question after you get the first issue of the newsletter, you can simply reply to the newsletter. I don't hide behind an email address. I'm accessible. But if you do want to talk to me on the phone, ask about paid consultations, and we'll sit down and talk about your specific situation, the needs that you have, and I'll even demonstrate interviewing skills that you can use to better serve your clients. How do you become a freelance copywriter? You find customers who have needs, have wants, they have problems to solve, and you get in there and let them know that you can help them solve the problem. You demonstrate to them you can help them solve the problem, and then ultimately they pay you to solve the problem. Until next time, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips, where we help you grow your freelance copywriting or marketing business into an agency that attracts clients that pay, stay, and refer.